Okay, welcome everybody to the first webinar that we've got for the Journal of Advertising Research for 2024. It's great to have all of you here. And we're super excited to go through. We have an amazing panel set up as well. Before I go in and introduce Marla and the great team of authors we have presenting from her special issue, I want to do a quick plug for a new free conference we're doing at the AAA's conference in March. This is the day before the conference, so starting on that the 14th in the afternoon. We have a really nice afternoon set up with a bunch of editors and former editors and experts in advertising, with the focus really on helping us develop better papers for submission to journals. So you can see here, there's a great set of topics. We're doing this with a bunch of the other editors in advertising as well. Marla is going to be there as well too. And if you're interested, please take a look when you're registering for the AAA's conference. There's a QR code there, or you can of course search just for the conference and take a look and see more details when you're registering. So definitely encourage you to check this one out. It's a very nice, interesting set of presentations we've got, and should be very helpful for crafting better submissions for journals. All right, now I want to turn to going through and introducing Marla and the amazing work that she's done with her special issue on prosocial advertising messages. I am deeply indebted to her for all that she's done. She processed a tremendous number of articles. It was a lot of work, very selective as well too. And we actually ended up going through and publishing more than we could fit in a single issue. We had some come out in our last issue, and we're going to have a couple more coming out later this year as well, simply because there was so much great work coming through. So thank you so much, Marla, for all that you've done. I also want to give a bit more background on Marla as well too. So Marla is incredibly accomplished. She is an associate editor for us. She's also the guest editor for this special issue as well. And she's a professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Lee Business School. She's a faculty scholar with their International Gaming Institute, and she's also a prolific publisher whose research interests focus on sustainability and health, pharmaceutical advertising, and consumer well-being. Before coming to academia, Marla spent time in industry and marketing, communications, and training development. So she sees both sides of both research and also working in the field. She's a former editor-in-chief of the Journal of Advertising, and she's also an associate editor at the Journal of Consumer Affairs. She's a past recipient of the AAA's Ivan Preston Outstanding Contribution to Research Award, and she's twice received the University of Memphis Alumni Association's Distinguished Research Award in Business, Social Sciences, and Law. So thank you, Marla, so much for all that you've done for the special issue, and of course, all that you've done for JAR and the wider advertising field as well. It's a real pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Colin. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for the opportunity for doing this special issue. It's a very, very important topic. And as you mentioned, it just generated a tremendous amount of submissions. So I want to thank all the authors, all the reviewers, Nanette, everybody to put this together, because it's just been a tremendous project, and I am so excited to see it come to fruition. With that, I would like to first introduce our distinguished panelists before we go right into some of the questions about some of these fantastic articles. Let me start, as I said, by introducing each individual author briefly. We have Celine.northcott, who is a research fellow at the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute and a PhD candidate in medicine, pediatrics, at the University of Adelaide. Her predominant focus is within implementation science, with a cross-disciplinary background in business marketing and population health practice. Lucy is an assistant professor of marketing and healthcare management at Flinders University, and her research focuses on advertising and consumer behavior, particularly in health settings. So it's certainly appropriate. They'll be talking about a paper related to health. Olivia.petit is an associate professor now. Congratulations, Olivia. Professor in marketing at Kedge Business School, Marseille, Lumini. Her research focuses on consumer neuroscience, sensory marketing, and digital marketing. Her research methodology includes behavioral and function, fMRI studies, and she is particularly interested in the role of mental imagery and multisensory interactions in consumer online experience. So welcome to will be our first presenters that are talking about papers related to health. Then we have Matthew Pittman, who is an assistant professor of advertising in the Tombras School of Advertising and PR at the University of Knoxville. His research interests include sustainability campaigns, social media, and information processing. Very highly published in a number of journals, including Journal of Advertising, Journal of Consumer Psychology, International Journal of Advertising, among others. And then our last presenter will be Kate Pounders, who is a consumer psychologist at UT Austin Moody College of Communication. Her interest is in goals, the self, and emotion in the domains of persuasion, consumer behavior, and consumer well-being. Kate is very, very widely published across marketing, health, and psychology journals, serves on the editorial review board of the JBR, and is a JAR associate editor, and I believe also a JBR associate editor, which is not on my list, but I think that's a relatively recent accomplishment for Kate. So as you can see, we have a very distinguished panel of authors that I'm very excited to have here. Thank you for your submissions. Thank you for your outstanding research, and thank you for being here today. So with that, I want to turn this over to our first paper, How Message Framing and Visual Cues Drive Health-Related Advertising Effectiveness, Consumer Response to Social and Mass Media Promotion for Pregnancy Screening Programs. And I just want to say, when this paper came in, I was so excited about it because of its uniqueness and what it was doing, and it really had some very strong implications, and I'm sure the authors will talk about that, since that is a question I will be asking them. Can we start though, Celine and Lucy? In a few minutes, can you please tell us about your research and its findings?
Thanks, Marla. I can start. So our research is quite pragmatic, I guess. And so we had a strong focus on designing impactful and effective health messages to promote the adoption of a screening program. So the program was centered around omega-3 screening for pregnancy for women in South Australia. And so the program essentially aims to address and identify women with low omega-3 status during pregnancy, which is a known risk factor for preterm birth. So with that in mind, I guess our primary objective for the paper in this campaign was to compare the effectiveness of using gain frame versus loss frame advertisements, and really look at how, examining the benefits of screening, or perhaps the consequences of not screening, might influence these behavioral intentions to engage with a screening program. And as well, look at, our target audience's attitudes and awareness around omega-3 screening using these different messaging techniques. Within that, we also wanted to look at the impact of using different pictorial stimuli, so emotional stimuli such as positive imagery around maternal health, mother and baby, or oppositely, using sort of informational stimulus, so highly informational cues like a screening form, to promote this screening program essentially, and look at, I guess, the varying levels of effectiveness in terms of driving intentions, driving advertising recall, and what works best. So as a really quick summary to that, we found that in our key target audience, those positively framed messages that were attached to emotional visual cues were more effective overall. But beyond that, we wanted to look at how easily our target audience grasped and responded to the information in the advertisement. So looking at the concept of processing fluency and how that might act as a mediator in terms of how people can actually process these different conditions. I was also really interested in looking at the moderating influences of regulatory focus and need for cognition. So having a look at, these different psychographic orientations of our target audience and how these might contribute to the effect of our health messages as well. So in summary, I guess our findings revealed that processing fluency actually did directly affect respondents' ability to consume our content, which is, makes quite a lot of sense. And we had actually a dose-response relationship as well emerged in these campaigns and in the messaging that really showed a correlation between when consumers had positive attitudes and awareness and high recall that actually drove up screening intentions as well. So having everything positively framed definitely contributed to having an effective health message.
Thank
you in a few minutes, Marla?
Oh, yeah, no, thank you for that wonderful summary. Where did you get the idea to do this project in the first place? Where did it come from, this idea?
Lucy, would you like to answer that one? You've got quite a lot of history with this.
All right, I'll jump in. Thanks, Celine. So our study was inspired by wanting to improve health outcomes for children. To reduce the risk of babies being born prematurely, the Australian Pregnancy Care Guidelines recommend women taking omega-3 supplements if they have low levels of omega-3 during their early pregnancy. So there is a new statewide omega-3 screening program, a test and treat program, but everyone in South Australia doesn't yet know about it. So to ensure that there's equitable access to this program, particularly in the groups that might be at greater risk of having low levels of omega-3 during their pregnancy, we recognise the need for a population strategy. So leveraging the efficiency of mass media for disseminating public health advice. In this study, we conducted the message pre-test experiment to inform the design of the campaign for our public health strategy. Through this, we wanted to increase message acceptance, inclusivity, and to guard against unintended effects of the campaign. So our decision to explore message framing particularly arose from the fact that the omega-3 test and treat campaign program, I should say, is somewhat a little bit different from the standard screening programs that we see, as it's including screening, and once screened, a woman returns to her healthcare practitioner and then is either advised to continue to start omega-3 screening, supplementation, or not to if she is already at a level where she has enough omega-3 in her system. So this combination of both prevention and promotion focuses behaviour added to the complexity that we needed in terms of developing our effective messaging. So consequently, we wanted to delve into the gain and loss framing approaches to understand their impact. So similarly, our study explored the role of visual cues in trying to facilitate the processing of this advice, particularly in behavioural attentions and message recall. So we wanted to make sure that through our message testing, we were able to develop the most effective campaign to encourage women to increase their awareness, as well as to undertake testing in early pregnancy.
Thank you. And it seems like you started to touch on my next question in there a little bit. What are the key implications of the findings from a pro-social advertising standpoint? If you want to build on that, yeah.
I can chime in if you like, Lucy.
Go for it.
Yeah. I guess sort of top level, I guess there are quite a few insights into how we can use this in pro-social advertising in health screening programs more broadly. So we're talking about a pregnancy screening program, but this could lend itself to other health screening programs as well. But I guess there's a lot of emphasis really around how to design tailored advertising. So there's a lot of buzz around this, highly tailored, precise advertising. But in fact, what we found is that, we can adopt a more efficient advertising approach and really prioritize basic demographic segmentation over this complex, highly tailored strategy. And that basically is supported by the fact that we didn't have any mediation or moderation pathways evident in our research. So we really didn't have to look at, devising these really, really unique strategies. And then I guess our next challenge to that would be, even if we did find this effect where we have, all of these unique different subsets and segmentations, how do we actually reach them anyway? So that was really, really nice to know that we should just be trying to be more efficient in terms of segmentation. And that's really important in the public health space when, we have health spending that's really, really scarce and advertising budgets are limited. So that's probably the biggest pro-social component there in terms of spending public health money responsibly. But also, thank you. I guess the other interesting thing that I wanted to talk to was this behavioural attitude paradigm that I did touch on earlier. And so I guess encouraging advertisers to focus on using these positive attitudes in the messages. So, focus on creating positive perceptions and their direct and meaningful impact, which has had a correlation to, these positive intentions to screen among, health populations, I guess. And I guess finally, the study emphasizes the key role in pre-testing which is quite a big thing in terms of public health. You don't want this boomerang effect where we have messages that then do the complete opposite of what we want. So I guess this really just highlighted to us that this wasn't just a shot in the dark in terms of whipping together a campaign and doing the evaluation later. That's really important to have this pre-testing approach so that we get the messages right. And I guess they can offer a roadmap for the development of future pro-social advertising and initiatives for health screening.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your insight on that. I think the work you've done really has some very practical implications, which I love to see in advertising research. With that, I think we need to move on to our next paper, which is Olivia.petit presenting how fusion metaphors and health campaigns influence consumer attitudes, tasty but unhealthy, healthy but not tasty duality considerations in health messaging. So welcome, Olivia. And we're going to start with that exact same question. In a few minutes, can you please briefly tell us about your research and its findings?
Yes, thank you, Marla, for the introduction. As is said in the title, our goal was to investigate the impact of fusion metaphors in health appeals. First, I think it's important to define what is a fusion metaphor, but make clear for everybody. Fusion metaphor is a visual representation of metaphor where two objects or products that are normally distinct are combined. For example, in our case, we presented cigarettes in a package of fries and fries in a package of cigarettes. The question whether the consequences of these two representations were equivalent or not in terms of attitudes toward fries and attitude towards cigarettes. Because imagine, cigarettes for non-smokers, at least, are generally considered as unhealthy and not very hedonic products. But fries are often perceived as very hedonic, even though they are not good for health. And the key question was whether fusion metaphors, by representing the two products together, instead of reducing consumer attitudes toward fries, might make attitude towards cigarettes more positive. That was the challenge of our paper. And our results show that it depends of the representation of the fusion metaphor. Presenting the fries in the package of cigarettes is not similar as presenting cigarettes in a package of fries. And the effect on the attitude towards the two products depends actually of the product placed inside the package, which serve actually as a target of the metaphor. This target determines the attributes on which both products will be evaluated. For example, when cigarettes are placed in a package of fries, the health-related attribute of cigarettes becomes silent, leading to a decrease of attitude towards fries by the comparison with the unhealthiness of cigarettes. But at the opposite, when we place fries inside the packet of cigarettes, it's not longer the health attributes that are considered. It's mainly the main hedonic attributes that become more science. And in this case, it results in an increase of attitude toward cigarettes. And we replicate these results in 2 studies. And we also conduct another one in which we changed the product to see if we keep the result independently of the target. In a second study, we replaced the fries with carrots in the package of fries. At the beginning, we can think that's a good metaphor, telling that, okay, we can eat carrots as fries, they will give us the same pleasure and making them more tasty. But as I said, because the carrots were placed inside the package, the main attribute that was evaluated was the health aspect. And because fries are unhealthy compared to carrots, actually the presentation of carrots inside the package of fries reduces the attitude towards those carrots.
You seem very passionate about this, which is wonderful. So where did you get this passion? Where did you get the idea for this research to inspire you?
That's very fun, actually. I don't know if you remind the documentary Killer at Large. in 2008. It's a little bit old now, but the film poster depicts fries in a package of cigarettes, replacing the traditional smoking kills slogan at the center. And I questioned myself about the relevance of this representation because it seemed impactful at the first glance. But in a paper we published in Psychology and Marketing in 2016, we already discussed about this metaphor. And because we think that sometimes metaphor can feel impactful, but if they are not well used, they can have exactly the opposite effect as the one we expected. But it was just an open discussion in this paper. And after a moment, I said, okay, maybe it's now the time to test really that we discuss in this paper by controlling it in an experimental studies.
Okay, excellent. And so now you have these great findings that were spurred from this idea. What are the key implications that you can find, that you can pull from your research from a pro-social advertising standpoint?
Yeah, the key point for us in this paper was to show that, okay, a metaphor in advertising can be very relevant and very powerful, but in the case of health prevention, of health in general, we have to pay attention because generally we compare products with opposite attributes. Some of them can be very tasty but not good for health. Others may be very good for health but not very tasty. And if we don't pay attention to the attributes of the products, we can have very negative effect on consumer attitudes. That was for us the key message, explaining when and how it can be relevant to use this metaphor in health prevention messages.
Thank you, Olivia. Very, very interesting work. So we're very excited to have it as part of this special issue and of course today. Matthew, we're delighted to have you join us as well. So Matthew is part of a paper, Why a Single Pro-Environmental Appeal Works to Promote Behavioral Change. On social media, one tip is many is more effective for non-green consumers. So this article follows, we had several submissions, I might add, on environmental. And this was one that obviously came through the review process, and we're excited to have that. And I know Kate is also talking about an environmental issue. But Matthew, we're going to start with you. And if you can, in a few minutes, tell us about this research and its findings.
Sure. So I'm sad my co-authors can't be here. Tyler Millefeld at Villanova and Kibo Yoon, one of our PhD candidates. They're both teaching right now, but that's their loss. If I have the power to share, I will share the genesis for this product. Is we were talking about ideas and we saw stuff like this, which we've all seen. It's like 50 tips to compost your coffee or like 35 suggestions for a greener Christmas. And we talked and we all thought it was kind of a stupid idea, or like this is too much, right? This has to be too much information. So we started thinking and we realized that the answer was that it depends, in this case, on how green the consumer is. So our primary hypothesis, which we weren't sure what was going to happen at first, but it turns out that green people like me, I want to save the planet. I love all the suggestions. I'll take 50, I'll take 10. I may not read it, but I'll like it, I'll click it, I'll share it. And we thought that non-green people would not like any tips because they would say, don't tell me what to do, right? I just like, let me live my life. But we found out, and through all of our studies, that they liked one tip was enough where, and it was in all cases, it was mediated through authenticity. So this was study one here in the bottom right, same ad, same picture, but when it was just a single tip, it was enough the tip got their attention. That one tip did better than no tips. It got their attention, made them think about it, and they liked it. And the thing that we found interesting was this was the case, not just when it listed the tips like here, but study two, we didn't even say the tips. We just said how many it would be, right? 3 conditions, click here for 1 tip, click here for 10 tips, click here for 25 tips. So it wasn't just the tips, it was thinking about having to process all that information. Non-green people are like, nah, I'm out. I don't want to do this. But 1 was enough. And then our final study, we ran these on Instagram for real, and it was hard to target non-green people because you can target things people like I can target a fitness enthusiast. You can't target somebody that hates the planet because that's not a category on Instagram. So we had to target people who are interested in like fossil fuels, tradition. It's like these roundabout ways to get to people that aren't green on Instagram. But we did, and it held up there too. And we were pleased with the results.
Very interesting. That, yeah, it's definitely getting people to do something from the environmental standpoint is hard. I've, you know, done some research in that area as well. So yeah, when I was evaluating your paper, I said, that's a really interesting finding. So where did you get the idea for this topic?
Yeah, seeing a bunch of bad green ads where it pops into my feed, but I would think somebody that doesn't, like my dad, that doesn't really care about the planet, he's not going to like this. So we started thinking, if he's not going to like that, what is the right threshold? Could we give him one tip, like small amounts? And that turned out to be the case.
Yeah, personal experience, personal, yeah, and that drives a lot of our research and what we do is what we see in our lives, right? And especially from a social issue standpoint. So what are the key implications that you can pull away from the findings of this paper from a pro-social advertising standpoint?
So for researchers, it's a reminder that authenticity can look different in different contexts and situations. Here, our first test, we tried like 6 mediators that we thought was going to work, the usual stuff, credibility, integrity, no. But authenticity is kind of vague and nebulous, and it's very much in the mind of the beholder, which makes it useful, but also very tricky to study. And then for practitioners, it's really simple. Know your audience. Like, who are you targeting? If you're targeting somebody that has been running marathons their whole life, that message is going to look different than if you're targeting somebody who is never worked out, but they want to start. So just a reminder to tailor not just the type of information, but even the amount of information to meet your audience's, threshold for thinking about it.
Yep, good points. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Moving on, we have Kate Pounders, and she is going to also be talking about a green paper, Pride Appeals and Temporal Framing, Compatibility Effects in Green Advertising. Will the match lead to persuasive outcomes by consumers? So Kate, as with everybody else, we'd like you to start by telling us briefly about your research and what you found. You're mute, Kate. Can you pull yourself
Yeah, sorry
up?
about that.
That's okay.
I was going to try and share my screen really fast. I have a slide, but if not, it's not allowing me to. Okay, here we go.
There we go.
Yeah. So just a little bit about our work, and also my co-author is not here. She actually had a baby last week, which is exciting, and both her and baby are doing well. And so just kind of briefly here, we were really interested in looking at message framing, as some of the other presenters here have talked about. And specifically, we were interested in looking at positive emotional appeals. And so there are kind of 2 types of pride. Authentic pride is sort of, it's associated with behavioral specific cognitive appraisals. So I'm proud of something I did. And then hubristic pride is more of, I'm proud of who I am. And so more of a global self-appraisal. And so what we predicted that, or what we expected and found, was that when authentic pride is evoked, it creates a low-level mindset, or low-level control mindset in the way that consumers process information, and where hubristic pride is high level. And so we were also interested thinking about the way that people talk about climate change or just sustainability behaviors. A lot of times people talk about it in like what we would consider the far future, but also thinking about temporal framing in terms of thinking about the near future frame. And so like what can be done like every day versus like in a longer period of time. And so thinking about temporal message framing in terms of actions and or consequences. And so prior research has established that near future temporal frames are associated with low level or concrete construals, And then far future temporal frames are associated with the higher level or abstract construals. And so basically through 2 experiments, the first experiment was in the context of a green product. And the second experiment was in the context of a PSA like you see here. And basically what we found was that we found compatibility effects emerged for an authentic pride appeal in a near future temporal frame. And again, and then also the hubristic pride appeal in a far future temporal frame. And then we also identified that processing fluency mediated these interaction effects.
Okay. So where did this idea come from for this article, for this particular research study?
Yeah, well, you know, when you think about, well, you can stop sharing this now. Think about a lot of work in prosocial, whether you're thinking about health or sustainability, a lot of the emotional appeal work has been negative. So like looking at fear appeals, guilt appeals. And so really interested in looking at positive emotions. And then also thinking about, again, the way that people talk about sustainable behaviors or climate change, and in terms of either near future or later down the road. And also thinking about looking at temporal message framing has been used in health, but not in the context of sustainability. And so it's kind of a combination of like, you know, temporal message framing actually hasn't received very much attention in our literature. But if you think about a lot of PSAs for pro-social advertising or marketing, typically there is a consequence or a behavior advocated for, you know, near or long term. And so we were really interested in looking just to see if these compatibility effects would emerge using kind of that construal theory in terms of cognitive processing.
Okay, and they did.
Yeah.
So what would the key implications be of that from a pro-social advertising standpoint?
Well, I think, like I said, going back to a lot of the work that's done in academia and that we see in the marketplace uses more negative emotions. And I think positive emotions can be just as impactful. And so I also think, again, thinking about temporal message framing and how that can really impact how people perceive messaging, because there's been, like I said, there's not been a lot of research in our field. The research that does exist and some of the psychology literature suggests that near frame, so like every day, is more effective because it's more top of mind, right? Because it evokes that concrete mindset. But this work contributes to a growing body of literature that shows that distant future temporal frames can also be effective. And I think also, you know, just that these compatibility effects can be used together in terms of not just sustainability, but when we're talking about health advertising or, you know, other topics related to pro-social advertising.
Okay, thank you. And so what I'd like to do now, because obviously we're managing the time frame to make sure we also have time for questions from the audience here. But before we turn to that, if you all want to jump in and say, what are your plans for future research? Where do you go from here? You've heard the other research. We've heard from different perspectives, some related research. What's next? And anybody can jump in that they wish. Where do you go from here? How do we build a research body in this area? Anybody?
Dr. Pounders, a PhD student and I are working on a paper of her choosing, and it involves construal level, not temporal framing. But as you were talking, I screenshotted a couple times to send to her because it'll be good for
Yeah,
her reference.
I'm happy to email you the paper. I don't think our paper is out in print yet, but I'm happy to email you the paper if you like, or email you the paper rather.
Thank you.
Thoughts?
Thoughts?
Add to what
Yes.
you were saying, Kate, in terms of like this temporal framing concept you see in health quite a lot. And I did kind of think, oh, I wonder how that might interplay with our screening program. Because you're only pregnant for so long, but we're trying to advertise a screening program that's available for women who are only 20 weeks pregnant or less. But obviously the long-term outcome is if you don't screen and don't test and you're low, that you're going to have a premature baby. So I guess our research, or in health, I guess more generally, when the outcome is more immediate, do we look at that immediate sort of framing and benefit around that temporality, or are we looking into the future? And I guess how to frame the consequences of that, I think, would be quite interesting for our research. But it was nice to hear it from an environmental point of view.
And it shows how a lot of what we're studying in different theoretical frameworks, of course, do go to different areas. And we are looking at some practical effects here for this JAR special issue. We really did want some immediate actionable items that came out of here. And so you all did a wonderful job of doing that in the papers as well. And now it's nice to be able to see where we can move, where we're building literature together. Again, as you just said, from green to health are both important topics, but we're seeing this, we can apply this here and we can apply this here. And I know Kate has done work in green and in health. And so I know she could speak to a lot of that. Other thoughts on future research?
I think on my side, as we found that some metaphors can have negative effects and not the one we expected. I mean, we are curious about testing other metaphors. For example, we saw that actually presenting the fries for the cigarette increased the attitude toward cigarettes, but maybe we can put something else inside the package of cigarettes. I was thinking, for example, of a syringe for suggesting heroin, or even we present the carrots inside the package of fries, but maybe presenting fries in a package of carrots may have actually a good effect for reducing the attitude toward fries. And it's just about checking, not if what we found in our research is not just depending of the stimuli we used.
Thank you. Any other thoughts before we turn it over to the audience for questions?
I'm just really excited to start looking at positive emotions, and so to continue to look at pride and pride appeals and things like that. So.
Okay. Well, we are very happy to address any questions the audience might have. You can please go ahead and put it right into the Q&A section or the chat section. I can come up with more questions. I'm very happy to do that. I don't see anything.
Dr. Pounders, I like the positive psychology stuff too, is great, mostly because media in general can be negative, and fear appeals like that kind of stuff is obviously can be persuasive. But I remember in grad school, or whenever you first learn about like psychology of happiness or joy, and you're like, oh, this is great. This should be applied more in the practical setting to be persuasive in a good way that doesn't leave consumers feeling gross, sad, spent.
Yes. Yeah, this was the first study that I conducted with pride appeals, and I'm working on another paper too with these two different types of pride appeals. And I think, hope would be really interesting to also, but there could be false hope could also be problematic. But that's something I'm kind of interested in exploring too. I've done work on guilt appeals, and so it feels better to look at positive emotions.
For our campaign, I guess, Lucy, I'm thinking about an ethical standpoint. There was almost a moment of relief when I was looking at the results going, oh, positive messaging is much more effective, because how on earth will we get this through ethics when designing our campaign? So I guess to give broader context, what we're doing now is actually on TV and radio and mass media, social media, Spotify. So it's a big statewide campaign. And I just thought, I don't know how we're going to get this through ethics if these more negative appeals are more effective in terms of, getting pregnant mums to screen for a test. So yeah, it was a nice relief to have this positive message that's more receptive. So that's an added practical bonus of trying to get something through advertising.
Indeed. And we have found in so much advertising research that, excuse me, it is these negative appeals and get people to cry and get people to feel negative and feel guilty so that they will actually act and do something. And it makes us in advertising look like, oh yeah, they just want to be negative, and that's, you know, that's how we'll get people to respond. And it would be nice if that's not the case. And we are finding that indeed we can have positive appeals. So I think that's a very good topic for future research. I see a few questions coming in here. So, okay, Celine and Lucy, why did you both choose omega-3 levels to study? Is this due to omega-3 possibly being an extreme cause to premature birth, or was it one of many factors that you both looked into studying on pregnant women?
I can start with that one. So there's a lot of evidence that omega-3 levels do affect a woman's propensity or risk to deliver her baby early, particularly less than 34 weeks, so really quite early. And there's so much evidence for that we have been testing this in South Australia. And there is a program that has started in South Australia on testing and treating women's omega-3 levels. So we built our advertising research to pre-test the campaign to increase awareness and increase women's likelihood to jump in, speak to their healthcare professional and do their testing because of all of this strong evidence. So we were specifically looking into omega-3 as a nutrient factor in our testing, and our pre-testing was all centered around that.
Okay. Thank you. Building on that, actually, if I can just add in, is there anything in the future, any other factors you might look at in the future?
So there are a number of different things that we are interested in terms of if we're working on the outcomes of reducing babies being born too early, then with the large amount of evidence from clinical trials from across the world, we will be continuing to refine how we can get across this messaging on omega-3 nutrients as a risk factor. And there are other factors focusing on the premature birth, and that is something that we could be looking at in the future.
And I think also there's a question that came in a little later, but directed to you. Have you looked into testing this outside of Australia?
So that is something that is incredibly important. Also, we know that in the US, there is some work being done around omega-3 testing as well. And we have been, our research group have been looking into some other target audiences across the world, seeing about their background knowledge around omega-3, around delivering early, and where they get their nutritional information from, and how we might be able to work with that in the future in terms of increasing awareness around these things.
Great, thank you. General question. Has anyone observed anything on the role of humor in pro-social ads? It's often serious subject matter. Anybody want to take that one on the role of humor? Anybody?
It is very serious, which I am not a fan of. I have never, there is research on humor in advertising and who it's making fun of, and is it sarcastic in tone or positive. The closest that I've come is bragging. Like I have a couple papers out last year on like when brands should brag and how they should brag, and when they beat their chest and say like we're the best, which is obviously not able to prove that's true most of the time. So not for me, but I agree with you that it is a very serious subject matter, and humor, which a lot of us people use social media for entertainment, passing time. Which would fit with the we were saying earlier about the need for more positive,
Right.
psychological understanding of pro-social persuasion.
Maybe I can give an example of, I mean, the metaphor I discussed in my paper was used actually in a campaign for baby carrots. I think it's related to humor. It was a campaign a few years ago in the United States where they use, they make fun about the vision of what is junk food and saying that you should eat them like junk food, and they use ads message showing, for example, very sexy model eating a carrot like a chocolate or something like that. I think it was very fun, and the campaign worked very well actually, and because that changed also the vision of what we can have on the product. And in this case, that has a very positive effect on attitude toward carrots.
Any other thoughts on that? Okay, we have a question. Did the studies primarily use visual ads? What are the implications for other channels such as audio or multimedia? I think is that directed towards Celine and Lucy?
Potentially. So we only looked at visual ads in our experiment, but keeping in mind that we had full intentions to, well, money pending, to have this mass media campaign, that, yeah, we did look at visual aids in terms of presenting a screening program and using that as a cue, this highly informational cue, or fostering this emotional visual cue, but translating that, I guess, across platforms to things like radio. That was something that we thought about, I guess, later on, with the creative teams, having the continuity across platforms. We wanted to make sure that, okay, we're going to emphasize like mum and baby and having this sort of calm or positive music. So while it doesn't translate exactly as we wish, yeah, it was something that we had to keep in mind afterwards in terms of, yeah, developing a radio ad that would match, I guess, what we would visually, I guess, envision in our brain when we're hearing something on the radio driving to work.
Thank you. This is an interesting question. A recent paper came out about audience-targeted negative ads, which mock customers playfully to get them to act. The ads run a lot in Asia and are actually quite effective. Would that work in health or environmental appeals? So again, it's the targeted negative appeals which mock customers playfully. What do you all think? We have people who authored paper on health and environmental appeals. Kate, Matthew, any thoughts?
I feel like the only stuff that I've done with co-authors from Korea or China, like the research was on interdependent versus independent self-control. So North Americans, presumably, I don't know, Australians, very much like, I want to do my own thing. I am my own person. I want to conquer the world. So health appeals that persuade to like, your solo good works better here in America, but if you're doing it in Korea, it'd be like, think about the greater good, like get vaccinated for the greater good. I want to picture, I want to see the example. What would an ad look like in that collective, traditional, like honor-based culture that's like mocking the consumer? I'm really curious.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
They were kind of fun. So like, they were ones, for example, of, for instance, like, you're fat, you should eat carrots, right? Or it could be like, you're not that fit, take omega-3s, right? It could be like that kind of to reframe it for your context, with pregnancy, right? So they're very sort of direct, but they're also very kind of humorous and playful as well too. Yeah.
I would love to see a company. I'm sure some company has tried that here in America. I feel like somebody would start crying. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
I think we get a lot of attention, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But that would probably be considered shaming of some sort, which obviously is not accepted by our society. And those are some interesting topics in general, looking across the borders in different countries, which I know we've all studied in some capacity in teaching advertising or doing some advertising research. Building on that just a little bit, what about the findings that you all just reported? Do you think that there might be some different things across countries? Some of you, did do this in other countries, but what do you think? Celine and Lucy, your work in Australia, how do you think that might hold or might have to be changed here in the United States? Olivia, and then, in contrast, Kate and Matthew doing work here. How do you think that would hold in other countries? Are there cultural implications? Just what you all just brought up, some of those differences that you
I
think
think
might need to be.
Matthew might have already alluded to that, like mindset of Americans being, do this for me, whereas, I mean, we would need to look at how that's received in Australia. Like a lot of the stuff here, I guess, is framed for the greater good. So like this is just purely anecdotal, but I think we would need to look at how we frame the messages in different countries from an advertising perspective. Obviously, there are so many things to consider from a logistical point in terms of getting an actual screening program internationally, but from an advertising point of view, like we just don't know what we're dealing with. Like we can't pretend to just think that it's a one size fits all and we're just going to roll out exactly what we've done. And even in our messaging strategies, so speaking to our health consumers is solely one component to this rollout strategy. We also then need to think about how we communicate this program to our health practitioners as well. And so we've got a very fragmented health system in Australia. And so we're trying really, I guess, a bunch of different strategies and how we reach them. So we can't just translate that over to somewhere like the US or Southeast Asia, for example, versus Asia. Like it's something that needs to be tailored anywhere.
Which I guess is the advantage of pre-testing and how useful that would be across the different audiences in different countries to take account of cultural factors as well.
Right. And JAR does have a very large international audience. And so this particular issue would be very relevant to the journal, of course. Kate and Matthew, what about moving your work across cultures?
I think cross-culturally thinking about pride appeal. So pride is it's a self-conscious emotion. And so I don't know, culturally, when you think about guilt appeals or you think about pride appeals, I wonder if it would, I don't know, but it would be interesting to see if it functions the same in terms of a collectivist versus an individualistic culture, because I feel like individualistic cultures may be more prideful, or I don't know, like there's research that indicates that collectivist cultures experience guilt and shame more deeply, and so it'd be interesting to examine, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think that I was just going to say our discussion here actually shows we need additional research in that area. Across countries. Somebody was going to started to say something. I apologize.
Yes,
Olivia? Yeah, please
yes,
go ahead.
I think in our research, it's actually a very relevant point because, for example, you have an unhealthy, tasty intuition that is generally observed in United States, while, for example, in France, we have more healthy, equal, tasty intuition. And in your case, we conduct the study in UK, but I think they are more related to the French healthy and tasty intuitions. That may be the reason when we present carrots in a package of French fries, that was not relevant. But for example, I said that in United States, the baby carrots campaign presenting them as in a package of fries was very effective. But maybe also related to this distinction between healthy and tasty intuitions, because in the case, as it's unhealthy, it should be tasty. And maybe presenting this produce as unhealthy can make them also more tasty. And trying to see the distinction between culture related to the use of metaphor, combining this unhealthy or tasty and tasty healthy products may be very relevant, I think.
Any other comments or thoughts on any of these topics that we've talked about, or anything else you'd like to add about your work and implications for policymakers?
This may be unrelated, but when we were thinking about mocking ads in America, the first thing I thought of was Spotify at the end of each year will take the aggregate data from all their streams and then do ads like your Spotify Wrapped. You listen to 30,000 hours of Taylor Swift. And occasionally they won't mock people directly, but they'll make jokes about like, hey, to the person who listened to I'm So Lonely I Could Cry by Elvis Presley 1,000 times this year, we're sorry. We hope you feel better. that's the closest thing I could think of.
Well, I'm hoping that our participants that joined us today learned something from the research that was presented today. The special issue is in process to be published. I mean, when will it be out, Colin, specifically?
We have the bulk of it will be coming out in March, in the March issue, and then we
Yeah.
have a few more papers coming out later this year as well too.
Right, yeah, and when will the March issue actually be released, I guess? was my
Usually it'll get
question.
released around the beginning of March, yeah. But there'll be an email that goes out. If you're on the newsletter, nice plug for that. You'll be getting an
Right.
announcement when those issues come out. Yeah, or that issue comes out, yeah.
So the beginning of March, about a month away, you'll be able to see 6 papers in print, and then we did have 3 previously published. And I'm hoping, and that was the goal of the special issue, is that it will stimulate additional research. And that's part of what this webinar, I should say, was about, to bring people together, to share ideas on research and where there were similarities and where there were differences. And hopefully the participants that joined us today, again, not only learned a little bit about the research, but got thinking, oh, I need to study this. We need to look at this. We need to look at that. Maybe I should contact one of the presenters today, which I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think they'd be delighted to be contacted about their work. So we're excited that everybody joined us, excited that we had such an esteemed panel of authors joining us today. Colin, did you want to say anything before we close this out?
I just wanted to thank all of you for coming, and again, thank you, Marla, for organizing and proposing and running the special issue as well too. It was a really great success. So thank you for your work. Yeah.
Happy to do it. Great topic, great people, great authors, great reviewers. So thank you.
Cool. See you everyone later. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Bye.